Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the regular Friday meeting of the City Club of Portland. My name is Bill Lesh and I'm your president. I'd like to thank the Benson Hotel today for their bringing to us a special dessert table. If those of you that are eating missed that, it is in the very back, and I've been assured by the chef at the Benson that it is both low-cal, low-fat, and almost no cholesterol. Of course, if you believe all that, I have a bridge that I'd like to sell you. We have several exciting events in the coming week. This coming Monday we have an open forum on adolescence and AIDS, which will be held from 7 to 9 p.m. in the conference room C of the Portland building. The speaker will be Christian Heron, a nationally recognized expert in the field of adolescence AIDS prevention education. Heron, who has AIDS, is widely known as the original Marlboro Man. The forum is free and open to the public. And on Thursday, March 1st of next week, a science breakfast on the future of the American electronics industry will be held at 7 a.m. at the Greenwood Inn in Beaverton. In view of what's been happening at Tektronix this past week, this is probably even more appropriate than it would be otherwise. The speaker will be Barry Cox, who is president of ATEC Corporation, and reservations are required, so be sure to call the City Club office. And next Friday, we also have a special speaker, Dennis Hayes, who is the Earth Day founder and chair of Earth Day 1990. This is the 20th anniversary celebration of Earth Day, and it's been claimed to be one of the events that got the modern environmental movement started. That program will be here in the Mayfair room of the Benson Hotel. There are benefits of membership in City Club that some of you may not be aware of. I have the opportunity today to introduce somebody who's very special to me and that I got to know this past year so well that I asked her to marry me, and she agreed. Pamela Rapp is second vice president and will be first vice president and chair of the research board, and is general manager of regulatory affairs at Portland General Electric, and she is seated on my left. So for all of you single club members, there is hope out there, believe me. We will have opportunities after the speech for questions. The usual format will apply. Those of you who are brave can ask a question orally. I ask you to introduce yourself. As you know, City Club members only are reserved the right to ask questions. If you are shy, there are materials for written questions on your table. Please hold them up so the staff can bring them forward. And remember that questions always end in a question mark. Change. Swift, sudden, stunning, almost unbelievable. Words which inadequately describe the events of the past months in Eastern Europe. The amazing speed with which these events have occurred and the radical shifts that are still evolving have raised many questions about what has happened and what is happening in Eastern Europe. Why did the changes occur? Why didn't the United States anticipate these events in Eastern Europe? Is there a danger of a return to repressive regimes if economic improvements do not occur quickly? And did Portland's own Punch Green single-handedly cause the revolution in Romania after 1 week on the job as our ambassador to that country? Our speaker today will offer answers to almost all of these questions. Richard Spielman is an assistant professor of international affairs at Lewis and Clark College, and as he told me at lunch, it is so delightful to go from the years of the Brezhnev era, toiling in the darkness of study on Eastern Europe and Russia, to the exciting events that suddenly makes his field of study one of the most interesting around. He is an expert in Soviet and Eastern European politics. He was born in Chicago, received his PhD from the University of California at Berkeley, and promptly left California, but for Nebraska, not Oregon, he tells me. He has traveled extensively in Eastern Europe and in the Soviet Union. He is fluent in Polish and German. He has just returned from a 3-month stay in the Soviet East Asian city of Khabarovsk, and you can ask him how to correctly pronounce that name, leading a group of students on an overseas study exchange. Presenting a speech entitled Developments in Eastern Europe, will you help me welcome Dr. Richard Spielman.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for the honor of the invitation to speak to you today. Quite correct. These events are exceedingly important, exceedingly swift in their movement. In mentioning what an honor it was to come to speak to you today, I was told, indeed, it is an honor. Your first choice was Jean Dixon. Actually, Miss Dixon had an opening on her calendar, but had the feeling she couldn't make it. Before I get into my remarks, I'd like to tell you first a little bit about my firm and my line of work, namely Lewis and Clark College. I'm new to Lewis and Clark, so I guess I can brag about it as an outsider. But as a colleague of mine has remarked, Lewis and Clark has been hovering on the precipice of greatness for some time, and we're just about to fall in. And if we do fall in, it will be by a very forceful push given by our new president, President Michael Mooney. He is even newer to the community than I am. We're very pleased to have him there. He's a scholar, internationally renowned scholar for his work on Vico, an Italian philosopher. Gifted man in all ways. And just to give you an idea of how good Michael Mooney is, he's been president of Lewis and Clark College for at least 7 months now, and the faculty is yet to turn on him. I'm also proud to announce that Lewis and Clark is participating in the Governor's Consortium on Higher Education, which is a project to combine the contributions of the business community to higher education. Very grateful and happy to be offering a course on Vietnam, which is largely due to the good offices of Phil Knight at Nike Corporation. Lastly, you might have heard that Lewis and Clark College just received the largest grant in its history, the largest gift from the Neely estate. We received $5.5 million. Now they just pass that around in faculty salaries, the place wouldn't be half bad. My line of work is Eastern Europe, Soviet Union. I have to tell you that business is booming. It is indeed quite thrilling finally to be someone working professionally on this field. It is also in some ways bizarre for those of us who were trained in comparative communism to watch the very subject matter of our area of study disappear from our eyes. These events are unprecedented, and everybody out there is trying to grab the exact nature of these unprecedented events. Someone told me that Gloria Steinem, for example, has come to the conclusion that this revolution in East Germany, East Berlin, is the first revolution in human history that proceeded entirely consistently with women's values. It's thoroughly nonviolent, exceedingly egalitarian, and when it was over, everybody went shopping. But while the shopping was taking place, ministers and bankers in West Germany were considering even a larger purchase, namely one slightly used socialist state, East Germany. And as we turn our attention to East Germany, the seriousness of these events then becomes apparent. Choices are being made right now, very serious choices, being made under pressure, which will determine the future for us. How we make these choices, what choices we make, depends largely on how we understand what is going on over there, and that in turn depends to a great extent on our own, say, cultural, analytical predispositions towards these events, because they are so swiftly moving. We're projecting upon them, I believe. Since Americans are a major actor in the world, I thought I'd begin my remarks by indicating how and why I think we're both culturally very well suited, as well as hindered in our ability to understand the events in Soviet Union and Eastern Europe. Our cultural advantages lie in our cultural roots, can be contrasted with cultural perceptions in Eastern Europe. I know the area, of course, is quite diverse and dissimilar in its cultural sensibilities, but to my mind, the writer who best captures the sensibilities of the region is the great Franz Kafka. We recall the Metamorphosis. Gregor Samsa wakes one morning to find himself transformed into a gigantic insect. But Samsa's first thought, as he lies there on his back and watching his little legs wiggle in the air, his first thought is, how do I get to work on time? Right? It is an area in which, in other words, the rules change on you quite quickly. The rules, the realities change quite quickly, and you have to be prepared for the strangeness of it all. Václav Havel, in his remark to Congress, noted the irony of his situation. Last arrested on October 27th. Last arrested on October 27th, not knowing that whether he's going to be in prison 2 hours, 2 days, 2 months, 2 years. Right? 4 months later, he's addressing Congress. Right? And what is his remark? Life is very strange indeed, he says. Right? They have a sense for the irony of it all. They also have a sense of gallows humor that gets them through. If you'd like to read an updated version of the sensibilities of Eastern Central Europe, read Milan Kundera. Read the Book of Laughter and Forgetting. He presents a joke common in the region after an invasion of Czechoslovakia by the Red Army. If a man unfortunately gets ill on the street, walks to the curb, throws up, solicitous Czech citizen comes up to him and puts his arm on his shoulder and says, "I know just what you mean." Right? But Americans don't have these sensibilities of irony. We see them otherwise. We see them not as ironic, but what? As a happy ending. We are the nation of happy endings, of justice rewarded. We see miracles. We put bumper stickers on our car. Expect a miracle. Right? When I saw Alexander Dubček stand in front of that magnificent audience of Czech citizens after 20 years and gesture towards them and gesture towards himself and give the pantomime of a hug, I was deeply moved. And I told myself, literally told myself, I don't believe what I'm seeing. And then I remembered. And then I thought, but I should, because Jiminy Cricket would. Right? That's our gift, Walt Disney. Right? That we are a people who expect miracles, expect something outrageous like this to happen. Only Americans could have made, as a cultural group, could have made the prediction 20 years ago that after the Czech invasion in 20 years, Alexander Dubček would come back to be president of Czechoslovakia after a nonviolent revolution sweeps Eastern Europe and 1 month overthrows all communist parties. Right? Only an American could have been foolish enough to make a silly prediction like that. Right? Why? If anybody had asked us why, we'd go, it's very simple. Dumbo can fly, can't he? Right? In short, they may have their Kafkas, their Kunderas, Govretsky, Miloš. We've got Walt Disney. As a sign of just how remarkable these events are, Disney's vision of things is being confirmed. It's a silly point, but I mean it in some ways as a serious point, too. We have a lunatic optimism about events coming out right. At this point in time, when everything is so precarious, it is good to have an international force that is driven by that lunatic optimism, that hopefulness, that sense that miracles can and do happen. A can-do actor in the international arena. Our disadvantages regard our materialism, frankly. Our inability to understand what's going on over there results from the fact that when we look at events, we tend to see them not in political and power terms, but in material terms. Watch the press yourself for your own ideas. Common interpretation is that Gorbachev is doing what he is doing because of economic problems, right? Or that the fate of Gorbachev is going to be decided economically. I submit that that's not true. I submit that what is going on in the Soviet Union has to do precisely with questions of power and relations of authority. Gorbachev's future is going to be decided in this arena and is going to be decided fairly quickly. Now, again, I'm a lunatic optimist, and I believe that it will be decided successfully. But I want to explain to you in a moment here give you on something in order of a lecture on what I mean by all this notion of power and the relations of authority, so that perhaps in the next several weeks or so you can watch events in the Soviet Union with a little deeper understanding, perhaps. And I start from the point of view, from our experiences in the Soviet Far East, that economics is not at issue. Why is that? Well, when you spend some time there, you realize that economic considerations just don't figure in and count the same way as they do in other parts of the world. My wife and I spent a year in Poland in 1979. We were shocked when we went to the Soviet Far East a decade later to find the economic situation, material situation in the Soviet Far East worse than it was in Poland in 1979. Right? Astonishing to us. Astonishing also because the Poles were angry and they did something about it. The Soviets aren't. They take it. Take it. Why do they take it? Well, I came to the conclusion one reason why they take it is they don't know how bad it is. We brought with us a little photograph of our house, Hume Court, Portland. Not a spectacular place. We didn't show it to anybody after the first time we showed it because we're basically embarrassed to show it. We lived in a small apartment they built for us, two rooms, dormitory, kitchen, little stove, 2 burners and an oven. You turn the burners on, the oven didn't go on. Turn the oven on, the burners didn't go on. Took your choice. People ask me, frankly, with some pride, is this comparable to the living situation in the United States? Had to bring them bad news, had to tell them no. Work considerations. I spent 3 months in the Soviet Far East trying to find a set of poured concrete stairs in which each tread was the same height. Right? Couldn't find it. And it was random, too. It wasn't either the bottom or the top. They just kind of stick it in there, right? Keep you guessing. Right? What does that tell you, Soviet Far East? One thing it tells you is they don't have a lot of lawyers. The other thing that tells you is that they've lost certain skills, lost the skills, like how to, add and divide, and that they don't care, Secondly, why is it different? Why don't they do anything about it? Well, they don't know what to do about it. They haven't known till now, primarily because they're Marxist economists. And my apologies to all my friends who happen to be Marxists. But I think in a Marxist economist is a contradiction in terms. It's on the order of a gracious repo man. That the skills and the considerations are ethical ones. I mean that seriously. Not economics, not efficiency, not doing more with less, but distribution. I mean, Marx at his origins was production. It came to be an ethical system for distributions. It's a religion. Explain in a moment. Ruling Leninist parties are primarily religious organizations. Gorbachev doesn't know what to do until now. 2 days ago, turning point in human history, turning point, Soviet history, Supreme Soviet decided to create private ownership of means of production, namely property, land, first time, 70 years. It's clear to the rest of the world that that is one ticket towards economic efficiency, but for ethical reasons, been prohibited in the Soviet Union. Thirdly, the Soviets take it because they're patient. I asked a friend of mine, how long are you put up with this? How long are you put up with Gorbachev? Everybody in the United States is saying, you guys are going to finally get tired and kick the guy out for not changing anything. The answer was very true. We Russians are very patient people. Very patient people. They're very patient and they don't like disorder. Don't like it. Don't like chaos. Hate it. Poles, on the other hand, are a surprisingly high threshold of disorder. It's amazing how high it is. Right? The Soviets don't like disorder, don't like chaos. They'll take it for that reason. Gorbachev comes along. He is impatient. He wants people to know how bad it is. He wants them to get mad. Right? He's trying to change it. He wants them to do something about it. Well, at this point in time, they are getting a little madder than he hoped, and disturbing things on a greater scale. But the point is, and here comes a lecture, that Gorbachev is self-consciously trying to change the relations of authority in the Soviet Union. Trying to change the relations of authority, and it's going to be decided politically. Then, down the line, you can get some economic changes, but the relations of authority are in the process of changing. What do I mean by that? All right. Attend you at Lewis and Clark College in your lecture class. I'm going to ask you some questions. in order to define for us today the difference between power and authority. Tell me what power is. In a social situation, how do you know if you're powerful? My students are better than this. Come on. You get to tell somebody what to do, right? Tell them what to do. The fancy word of social sciences, right? Gain compliance. Now, necessary, not sufficient. Why? I got a 10-and-a-half-year-old son. He sits down in front of a hot fudge sundae. I say, Kenji, finish your sundae. He does. Am I powerful? What if I say, eat your lima beans? Right? And he does. Raw power, right? It's gaining compliance despite opposition. That's what power is, gaining compliance despite opposition. People doing something that they normally wouldn't want to do. How do you get people to do something they normally don't want to do? 3 ways. Come on, how do you do it? Fear, persuasion, force, reward. All right, pay them. All right? Finish your lima beans to get your allowance. Instrumental reward. Finish your lima beans or I'll spank you. Force, coercion. 3, finish your lima beans because I'm your father. Right? Authority. Authority. Now, all 3 ways of gaining compliance, these 3 ways, have costs, right? Cost allowance, hitting him, hurt my hand. What about legitimate relations of authority? Well, that means he gets to make claims upon me in the future, right? Dad can have the car keys. Right? Of these 3 ways of gaining compliance, authority is the cheapest. It's the cheapest. All right? Now, in our society, the highest order, legitimate authority is exercising what we say in legal rational terms. You obey an office, rule of law. Okay? It's not Bob, your neighbor, stops you when he's a cop, gives you a ticket. It's because he's got a uniform on, he's an officer. You obey the office of the policeman. There are other kinds of legitimate relations of authority, namely religious. It is written, but I say unto you. Charismatic. Claimed authority. Extraordinary tasks. Insights into the laws of human historical development. Ending history. Abundance. All right? The legitimate authority that the Communist Party, the Soviet Union, has been exercising up till now has been a charismatic authority. And Gorbachev is self-consciously changing this. How? All right. Lecture part 2. Dual structure of power in the Soviet Union. Dual bureaucracy. State side, a party side. Government, party. Parallel. Every office in the state, parallel office in the party. You have a minister, you have General Secretary of the Communist Party, right? You have a Politburo in the party side for the ministry. You have a legislature. What is it? Supreme Soviet, like our Congress. Oh, but also on the party side, you have a central committee. Right? Down the line. At its origins, Lenin wanted to build an independent state, became head of the state, not head of the party. But when he would lose a vote in the state, he'd take it over to the party, reverse it in the central committee. The power went back to the party and eventually the authority. Gorbachev comes along self-consciously, is attempting to give power to the state. The Supreme Soviet now, it's popularly elected. Jim Baker's going over there, sitting down and talking to a committee of the Supreme Soviet. The power is going to the state side. He wants to be president. What's happening to the authority of the Communist Party? It's disappearing. It's disappearing, right? There's civil war between the Azeris and the Armenians, and you know who's mediating the conflict? The Baltic secessionists, right? Because the Communist Party, the CPSU, doesn't have any authority there. Now, that means Gorbachev, in this point in time, is an extremely precarious situation. Because as the communist authority, the Communist Party declines, disappears, threatened chaos. And he has got to, and he's trying to, move the authority of the party into an electoral authority. That's why he's going to run against parties. Pluralist system. The only way to regain the authority of the Communist Party of the Soviet Union. And I tell you, it's precarious. You watch the papers on Sunday. Everybody in the Soviet Union is frightened to death of demonstrations that are going to take place this Sunday throughout the Soviet Union. Democratic platform, non-party groups are going to demonstrate everywhere. And they're afraid they're going to lose control of these demonstrations. And there's some people around that Gorbachev and the Communist Party is going to go the same way of the Communist parties in Eastern Europe. Right? Let's look at Eastern Europe for a moment. They did the exact same thing, the communist parties did the exact same thing that Gorbachev is now doing. They just did it earlier. The Poles did it in March, called for elections, open elections in March. Polish Communist Party lost everything in June, everything. Never thought it would happen. Right? Socialist Party in Hungary, well, it's socialist now, it used to be communist. Decided to call themselves socialists. That doesn't help either. They're gone. They're out of here. Right? They're out of here. They could not make that transition. What it means now in Eastern Europe is, the time for the economists is what it means. That we are out of that realm of political calculation because now the questions are economic ones. How do you economically put this place together? Fortunately, the authority of the new governments is so large, their popularity is so large, they can do these radical economic activities and, for a period of time, get away with them. I am optimistic about the situation in East Europe from the point of view of economics. One of the reasons I'm optimistic is that jokes still keep coming out of the area. As long as they stop telling jokes over there, we're in trouble. I worked for a long period of time on Poland, and hearing Polish jokes was an occupational hazard. The only ones I pass along, because I have a great deal of admiration for the Poles, are the ones that the Poles themselves create and tell about themselves. The latest joke about the Polish economy is as follows. It heartens me. Poles say that there are two solutions to their economic problem. The rational solution and the miraculous solution. The rational solution. The rational solution is that the heavens open and the Virgin Mary, Mother of God, descends with $50 billion to pay off the national debt. Right? The miraculous solution is that the Poles get organized and work their way out of this mess. Right? But what has happened? Most fortunately, what has happened is the heavens open. It wasn't Virgin Mary, Mother of God, as the World Bank. Right? It was the Japanese. Right? That there is a keen sense in the West, an appreciation for the West, in the West, of the precariousness of the situation, that we must do something, and we are doing something. I'm hopeful in this situation. What about the German question? Economically, again. That's a dicier one. Why? Because what you've got is a snake swallowing a pig. You've got a python swallowing the pig. There's no doubt about it. Mouths open up and clunk, right? The pig's going in. The problem is that the price of the pig is getting higher every day. And that if you read today's paper, the Germans have decided they've got to have a one-to-one swap on West German marks for East German marks. That's very costly. That's $100. That means bonds prices are going to go through the ceiling everywhere. Japanese stock market is always falling. That's a potential world recession in order for the snake to swallow the pig. And they sometimes choke on them, right? You can choke to death. Nobody knows what the costs are. It's a precarious moment. If Jiminy Cricket's right, swallow the pig and it's healthy, it works out, it's going to be one very strong snake over there, right? One very strong snake over there. What does this mean for the situation of world peace, in the future, to have this reunited Germany? I can't get into great detail. I'm sure I'll get questions on this in the future. Well, I tell you, that is a question for the future. But it's 5 to 10 years before we know what will happen in this situation. But in the meantime, it looks as if the world has, and I am hopeful about this, has developed humans have come to a realization now how one organizes social life successfully in this point in time. We have a package. We know what the package is. Integration in the world economy, market economy, and social welfare system that can sustain and protect those who are most damaged by it. Right? We know that now. And although it's risky and we're moving on unknown territory, at least we have an outcome in advance. We know in advance that we can act on. Finally, one last point, and that is the United States' position in all this. I like to look upon the end of the Cold War as the end of a real war. It helps analytically in regard to the Soviet Union. It also helps in assessing our own position in this changed international situation. Analytically, it helps because basically what you have in the case of Gorbachev coming to power, realizing the Soviets cannot fight the Cold War anymore, have lost the Cold War, and overthrowing the old order as if a war has been lost. You have to look upon East Germany in the situation as if a war is over and now an entire new regime is coming into being. That's what's transpiring over there. And the United States won, clearly won. We won for reasons that I'm not especially fond of, but you have to look at mine and consent to them. One reason we won is we went on this incredible military spending binge in the early 80s. We did. It scared the living bejesus out of the Soviet Union. KGB was on war alert, monitoring blood drives in London, right, in the early 80s, fearful of war. Right? We won the Cold War as you win a war. We fought the Cold War as we fight a war, except it was just over time. But our side fought their side in battles all over the world. Not directly, indirectly in a time, but Africa, Southeast Asia, Central America, everywhere. It was a war. And we paid for it. Our defense spending, that's the way you pay for it in a war, and that's deficit spending. Right? When the war comes, you immediately go to the deficit and you pay what you need to win it. We did it for 40 years. Meaning what? Meaning as the Cold War ended, our position is comparable, not identical, but comparable to the position of the British after World War II. They won the war, but no longer the power that they used to be. We are in relative decline. Relative. Don't get too scared about this stuff. We still have 22% of the world manufactures. But we are weakened. And we paid costs. My final point. The costs that we pay for it, we can tell in the budget, fiscal, trade deficit, so forth, but also social costs at home. And now I return to my origins, political origins. One of the costs we paid was to stop the civil rights movement in its tracks. All right? Martin Luther King, who, among other great things, said the moral arc of the universe is long, but it bends towards justice. Right? Martin Luther King diverted attention to the civil rights movement and war in Vietnam in order to take a position on it. War in Vietnam, which is part of winning the Cold War, fighting the Cold War, stopped the civil rights movement. Peace movement came along, diverting energies there as well. Right? Now that the Cold War is over, I'm making this point, that it's time to return to unfinished business. That we have our own wall in the United States, and that is the wall that keeps out American citizens from full participation in our society. We should return to that and bring that internal wall down. That's our task now. That's the benefit that we should accrue from this victory in the Cold War. And if we don't, we're squandering our victory. Final point. Leave you with thoughts about Soviet Union. The Soviets regard the situation as follows. That Brezhnev and all his predecessors brought the Soviet Union to the edge of a great abyss. And Gorbachev has taken a giant step forward. Let us hope that Mikhail Sergeyevich, like the hero of my childhood, Dumbo the Flying Elephant, remembers to hold on to the feather. Thanks very much.
When I was in college, and I spent 2 years at Lewis and Clark, if somebody had told me I would have had a humorous professor, I would have said, it's a lot like military intelligence, isn't it? Thank you for bringing some relief to a very serious subject matter. We now move to the question part of our program. The microphone is set up in the center of the room for those of you that would like to ask a question. Please end your question in a question mark. If you have a written question, hold it up so the staff can see it and bring it forward. The opportunity for the first question is from our board host, Pamela Rapp.
In fact, I thought that speech was so good I started taking notes. It's just like I was back in college writing down the points. Mr. Spielman, the Oregonian recently ran a series of articles on the environmental crisis in Eastern Europe. Could you comment on what you've seen and how you believe the governments are going to be able to deal with this problem in the coming years?
Well, I've seen with my own eyes how degraded the environment is in Eastern Central Europe. It's quite appalling. Sea of Gdańsk is close to a dead sea. The copper domes of the monuments in Krakow are dissolving in the sulfuric acid in the air. Friends of mine, people in their early 40s, have cancer. from this degradation. What is fortunate now is, for the first time, these governments can address this issue. What's unfortunate, of course, is they don't have the resources to address them. For that reason, we hope that the infusion of Western capital and a hopefully quick turnaround of the economy will allow them to attend to this. But I would like to say that the environmental issues are going to be addressed directly. I think they're going to be addressed directly symbolically. That is to say, people are going to talk about them a lot. But it takes money.
Stuart Gates, member. Do you know how well, if at all, our CIA anticipated this 1848 revisited in Eastern Europe and the Soviet Union?
Yeah. You know, I don't know. I just don't have the kind of contacts there. I doubt that anybody really anticipated. I have a little rap on why that's the case, and it has to do with this field being split and politicized. And you have two fields. You have a conservative anti-communist group of analysts, and then you have a liberal group of analysts, and they're both half right, which means they're both half wrong, which means everybody missed the point. They're half right, and the conservatives half right in their correct interpretation of how miserable these regimes are and how much the populations despond. But they were wrong in their own hyperbole in not anticipating the possibility of genuine reform. If you're a conservative anti-communist, you can't make room for Gorbachev. It doesn't fit. Somebody can come up in the ranks like this. On the other hand, the liberals are very quick and very good to recognize the significance of Gorbachev. They could see him come, and they could see his genuine nature once he made it there. But they were wrong in thinking that the place is just, not essentially different from the West. That is to say, the populations don't mind state of affairs. So in other words, you got a reformist who also made this miscalculation that you can reform a communist system. You can't. Liberalizing it leads to liberalism because the population given this opportunity will overthrow you. So unless you could hold these things together in your mind, the anti-communist and the liberal view, you couldn't put the two together to watch this happen. Please.
Charles Hall, City Club member. Several weeks ago, Gorbachev and his leaders went through some fairly significant meetings in Moscow. Could you describe from your perspective what went on in those meetings and what Gorbachev's position is today?
I'm afraid I don't know exactly what these meetings, it's so constant. I mean, what, the Central Committee on abolishing Article 6 and so forth? Or,
yes.
Yeah. Well, that's, world historical moment. Abolish Article 6. That is the article of the Constitution which gives the CPSU the leading role in society, which, in the language I use, is its charismatic status. That there's no political group that can exist in the Soviet Union because only the Communist Party has insights into laws of human and historical development, and therefore is the only political organization worthy of ruling. Members of ruling communist parties are different from their society in kind, not in degree. They are history's heroes, vanguards of the proletariat, different in kind. Our parties, remember, a Republican, a Democratic Party, are different in degree from your fellow citizen, the degree of your commitment to the Republican Democratic Party. When you change to a system in which you have competing parties, when the Communist Party becomes one party among others, it's different in degree, not kind. And that's the revolutionary turn. And that's, the significance of that Central Committee meeting. Please.
Ray Polanyi, a member of the City Club. Professor, communism may be dying, but what about democratic socialism, which we in America are, anything that has the word socialism is anathema, but what about democratic socialism in the rest of the world?
Right. A good argument can be made that what you will see is a rise of these social democracies, not immediately in Eastern Central Europe, because you're going to move to a very severe market system in order just so you have prices that reflect costs and demand. But in the longer term, most likely have social democracies on the order of the Swedish case and so forth. Now the question is, are these socialist or capitalist? To my mind, they're capitalist. To me, social democracy is a left variant of liberalism. That liberalism is triumphant, but liberalism is not just 19th century market night watchman state liberalism. Right, it's not that. And there's, I mean, you have a continuum between, you know, social democracy on the left and social Darwinism on the right. We are closer to the social Darwinism than the social democrats. But to my mind, that's a variant upon liberalism. Now, to the Soviet mind, it's interesting. They are now saying socialism has been created in Sweden. That's a reference. People close to Gorbachev. The Swedes achieved it, not us. Well, I'm glad they're saying that, just for their own, you know, point of view. But it's not, you know, between you and me, it's not socialism they achieved in Sweden. It was a variant of capitalism. Please.
Tuck Wilson, Lewis and Clark graduate.
Hey.
Do you foresee any circumstances where access to atomic weapons could fall into the hands of competing groups within the Soviet Union?
I guess in a word, no. I mean, that falls in the category of, I mean, then you start having just nightmares. I mean, right? I mean, what if Gorbachev dies, right? I mean, then people say, what, you know, and then we're all really in trouble in the short term. I mean, if he makes it to October, well, to June, I think he will, by the way. I think he will. But I mean, and he's going to run for president of the Soviet Union. I say October because I figure in June, it's a party congress in June. The CPSU will become like the Socialist Party in Europe, like the Labor Party, like the Socialist Party in Germany. And then they'll run for office, for president, and Gorbachev will have a running mate. And if he doesn't put on a, you know, bulletproof vest like Dan Quayle and actually pick somebody of some caliber, then we can, you know, then we can rest assured that it's in place, you know.
Annette Farmer, City Club member. Mr. Spielman, as a person born, raised, and educated in Eastern Europe, I have had the chance to travel to Eastern Europe on numerous occasions in the last 25 years. Each time there were substantial changes. Now, knowing a lot of people in several of the Eastern European countries, talking to many people, including some intellectuals, government people, and so on, my conclusion is that the #1 reason is economics. Really, this is what I heard for the last 25 years. Now, as far as the other reason that you're talking about, power and so on, that is perhaps so, but that comes after economics. Now, I would like to hear you again say that it is power and not economics. Thank you.
It's power, not economics. You know, this degradation, this economic this difficulty, I think is sort of a sign of the degradation of the entire order. Gorbachev and the people around him act from and within a political universe. And I think they see more wisely than others, the Chinese and so forth, that the changes have to come in relations of authority. They would have preferred to change the relations of authority and not introduce private property. Much preferred. One good sign that it is not just the economics that they're acting on is the fact that this guy's been in power for 5 years and he hasn't made any economic changes. Right? Now, I'm not saying it's economically great over there. The contrary, it is a mess. But what I'm trying to say is that he thinks in, and to watch what's going to happen and to be able to predict and sense what's going on, you still have to look at power questions and ideological questions. Right? For example, I mean, when this Common House of Europe, the major ideological change, Gorbachev's statement in Vladivostok, that's when we knew 3 or 4 years ago that these changes are as radical as they're going to be. Because what does he say in Vladivostok? He says that human interests are above class interests. Whew. From a Marxist point of view, you cannot say that. Right? You can't say that. Common House of Europe, that comes from a debate. The Hungarians changed the world. They really did. Matyas Soros is the main actor in world history as far as in the 20th century. He's a foreign minister or secretariat of foreign affairs in Hungary, and he elaborated the Common House of Europe argument. Elaborated the argument that small states, like Hungary, so forth, have the right to act in independent foreign policy when the relation between the superpowers decline. Right? in the name of Europe, he says. Well, the Czechs come along and say, that's very nice, except Lenin didn't make any distinction between large and small states, but only between capitalists and socialists. Right? And that guy was right. If you're a small European state, you're one of many. Right? One of many, different in degree, not kind, no longer charismatic, no longer religious. That's my point. Please.
Steve Shell, member. Regarding the pig and the python,
yeah.
What about the problem of Silesia and East Prussia and the 2-4 plan,
yeah,
and the Oder-Nisse line? Can you comment on the ability of Germany to swallow some of these individual areas, or is there any inclination whatsoever to do so?
Yeah, they can't. I don't know what kind of inclination there is. I don't think it's very strong at this point in time. But that's part of the pig they can't have anymore. I mean, that's been sliced off, and that's got to stay. Everybody knows it has to stay. You know, Gdansk used to be Danzig, right? If people realize that solidarity came out of this territory, the Western territory, Szczecin, Gdańsk, Wrocław, for interesting sociological reasons, then they would really consent for the Poles to keep them. And what he's talking about is after World War II, Poland moved west across the map of Europe. Just boop, borders changed. Lost territory to the Soviets, picked up territory from the Germans. Right? Soviets were smart. Meant to the Poles would always be reliant upon the Soviets for protection. To this point in time, notice that Mazowiecki has asked Soviet troops to stay in Poland. Only way they can keep the Germans out. And I mean, I would like to see the Poles part of this negotiation. I don't think they will, but then perhaps we should have it in Warsaw. They should invite the negotiation to take place in Warsaw. It is critically important that the borders stay the way they are in Europe.
Yeah. Dan Goldie, member. In the case of China, we saw a situation where they were opening up markets,
right,
moving toward a freer market system,
right,
and then they had inflation outrunning the market economy. They had all kinds of problems. Now they've set themselves back by crushing the new movement.
Sure.
The question I have is, have we ever seen a situation where a non-market economy, a communist economy, has ever been able successfully to move to a market economy? And if we haven't seen one, how do you think we're going to get there?
When you wish upon a star. The borderline between, interesting point, one point to make is that we always thought the borderline between East and West was the Elbe Sala River. It's not, it's the Amur, right? I mean, it's between Russia and China. That's East. And the situation you have in China is really a variant on South Korea or elsewhere. I mean, South Korea has its Gwangju province. I mean, we weren't upset when they went in and blasted, right, the poor Koreans in Gwangju over the market economy. I mean, it's a similar, I mean, I don't like it in Beijing, and I don't like the secret visit and everything else. I don't. I really don't. But it's an instance of central power allowing this market to develop. We haven't seen the transition anywhere from a state plan to, but we will see it, and I think successfully in Eastern Europe, in Soviet Union, at least in Eastern Europe, because they're doing it right. They move first in the political arena. That's where you move. Then you can adjust the economy, and you can absorb the social tension, political tension, the hatred, right, that it generates once you make the transition to the market, because people have a political arena to act in. They're doing it wrong, and the other way around in China, as far as I'm concerned. Please.
With regard particularly, I'm Gregory Kafuri, with regard particularly to the centrifugal forces which threaten the integrity of the Union, the Soviet Union, there are some who see a nascent Russian fascism waiting in the wings. Are you one of them?
And the reason why, I want to know the reason why. They don't have an ideology potent enough to bring enough people with them. That's one reason this triumph of liberalism is true. I mean, you have Fukuyama's, this end of history. It's an odd article in some ways, but there are a lot of good points in it. Communism at one time was a living ideology. It drew people to it. And often for good reason, not just for dumb reasons, for good reasons. Fascism drew people to it. Right? The only ideology sort of left standing after the end of the 20th century is liberalism as a magnet, as something that motivates people. This great Russian chauvinism is not enough in the Soviet Union to inspire people again. That's one. Secondly, the Russians themselves are too small a population. Even with this great Russian chauvinist ideology, they're now badly outnumbered. Badly outnumbered. The army is in Gorbachev's back pocket, and not only at the general level, but lower down. You listen to the radical congressmen, Soviet congresspeople, deputies, all right, the Democrats. They will tell you that the audience that is most eager to hear their message is the second echelon of the army. They like it. And you need the army in order to get the chauvinism, fascism going, to protect it. Thirdly, finally, Soviets at the highest level are acting against these people. They're acting against the Pamyat group. They're investigating them. They're trying to stop them. So I don't see it. I know it's out there, and this anti-Semitism is worrisome, but I don't think it's going to be enough to affect events.
Richard Polk, member. Do you think Mr. Bush could pass your essay exam?
Huh.
And what are the implications if he cannot?
You know, I think, you know, there's, first a slam. I like David Broder's line that President Bush is a nibbler. Right? That if you compare his budget to what he says in his budget, they're two different worlds. But Broder ends by saying that in a world of toothless politicians, even the nibbler is king. Right? And after slamming him for that, I like basically what's going on with Bush and Gorbachev. I like people in the NSC. I like Scowcroft. It's a guy out of Berkeley, Dennis Ross, a very important fellow. NSC is devising our policy towards these major areas, and 2+4 is out of the National Security Council. It's very good. Second, I like Jim Baker as Secretary of State, so long as you have an active NSC that has some experience in international affairs, because Baker doesn't. Why do I like Baker? Politics. The guy's politically skilled. He knows. You've got it. When these political changes happen, you have to get somebody with horse sense, who can take a bead, who hasn't been reading books all his life, that goes over and smells what's going on and knows how to act. And that's his advantage. So I'm hopeful. I don't Bush can pass it or not pass it, but his administration, I think, is acting well. I surprised myself to say that, but that's true.
I'm Don Sterling, a member. Speaking of the small countries of Europe, there's been some writing lately to the effect that what those Eastern European countries should do is form some kind of confederation, in a way reinvent the Austro-Hungarian Empire. What's your outlook on that?
Brzezinski recommends that, so I don't know, you know. I tend to doubt it because I just think they're going to move in a nation-state direction with that'll suit them more. There's a sense that we should band together, but when it comes down to it, you don't band together. You ask for the Soviet troops to stay. When you want a confederation of Polish and Czech troops to keep the Germans out, no. You rely on the larger power in the area. There is more of a chance for some confederation developing for the odd and interesting reason that all these people in power now knew each other in the opposition. That there is a supranationalist ideological identity among the Eastern European heads of state that transcends their previous national animosities. But I don't think it's enough. I would have to know more about it. I just don't. What advantages accrue to confederation? But at this point, I think they're going to have to fasten upon their own internal problems before they can move to confederation. Please.
Barbie Lyon, it seems to me that several weeks or months ago the Poles took the deepest breath and inaugurated the most radical set of economic reforms. I haven't heard anything about what is happening there. What has been the result of early result of those reforms, and what do you see for the future there?
Yeah. Actually, if you just look at today's paper, there's a short article in the Oregonian on the consequences of it in terms of statistics. I never remember numbers, but one thing I do remember is there's all sorts of goods in the stores in Poland now and nobody can afford them. And that's a change. And that's why you need this political goodwill that still by polls of 2/3 of the population wants to go ahead with the reforms as they are because they know there's no alternative. When you move suddenly to a market system, when you move suddenly to a convertible currency as the Poles did, and they did it in a week, Soviets still talking it's going to take them 5 years. They don't have the political basis to do it. Poland could do it in a week. But the consequences of that is that prices jump like crazy. Those who have access to hard currency, to Chicago, are doing all right. And a lot of people who don't are doing very, very poorly, particularly the pensioners. So there are plans in Poland now, restaurants for the poor, so forth. I anticipate that this money coming in from the World Bank will be directed towards sheltering this group. Comments out, I heard a report out of Hungary, I don't too much store by it, but a reporter of a Pennsylvania paper, a woman went over and interviewed people on the market and saw them. It's typical when you go into suddenly in the world market, people walk by stand for my stand. I can't buy the fruits there for the first time, can't buy it. Vegetable, can't buy it. Meat, can't buy it. Right? And they're saying, what's it worth? These democratic, it's not worth anything for us. Kind of mumbling like that, but I don't think the mumbling is going to express itself politically yet. Interesting, actually, in Hungary, the smallholders party is doing quite well. Rebirth from the interwar period is the largest party, is the agrarian party. And they're doing well because they're planning on dissolving all state and collective farms and turning them back to the private farmers.
Last question.
Last question.
Lisa Haler, City Club member. Last year we heard about Europe 1992 and the Single Market Act. This was before the wall fell. What do you think is the future of that plan?
Future. I think that the future is on hold on that one, that the main question is the German question at this point in time. The Eastern Europeans, among others, want to slow it down because they want access to this consolidated market as well. So unless something less than a dramatic note to end on, I'll tell you I'm not certain what's going to happen with EEC because I think the situation in Eastern Europe is more pressing at this point. Bye-bye.
Thank you. I want to thank Richard Spielman for a very exciting and interesting program. I've been given a note. You know, I butcher names here on a regular basis, but rarely do I butcher the names of our television stations. I'm told that I managed to scramble KATU TV's name, and to that entire station I apologize, and I hope that I'll get it right next week. And I hope you will join us next week for Dennis Hayes, the founder of Earth Day, and we are adjourned.